we are going to be recording today's session. The reason we're doing that is to hopefully share the information that we'll be discussing today with others. We also will have that captioned to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So with that, we will go ahead and begin our Lunch and Learn. And first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I hope that this information helps you in some way with the child or students that you are working with or that you have at home. First of all, my name is Abby White. I am a teacher for deaf and hard of hearing students down in the southern part of the state, and I'm also a board member for Ohio Hands and Voices, the organization that is hosting today's Lunch and Learn. Our topic for today is all about related services. And so that is where we will focus the majority of our attention. That being said, if you have other questions, feel free to ask them. I do know we have some additional topics that we will be discussing in the future around different areas of the IEP or different topics related to deaf and hard of hearing children. So please know that if I refer you to those future discussions, then hopefully those will be happening or we'll try to answer. And then I've also got some resources at the end of today's presentation that I will share with you. Before we move on, also I wanted to mention that with this recording, we plan to talk today for about 20 to 25 minutes. We'll kind of go through the presentation that you hopefully see on your computer screen. And you can ask, as I mentioned earlier, you can ask questions in that chat box. But if you do that during the actual 20 to 25-minute presentation, then that message could also be recorded. And so if you want to hold your questions until the end of the PowerPoint, then I will turn the recording off. And so we can do it in that way if you're more comfortable. Okay, so here we go, related services. The definition of related services is that it is the transportation and supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. So in other words, any of the services that the deaf or hard of hearing child needs to benefit from special education, that is considered a related service. And it's actually part of the IEP. There's a specific section in there that talks about related services. So knowing that, we've got a couple of pictures here of some related service providers. You will see the young lady with the long hair is interpreting, and so interpreting services are also considered a related service and should go in that area for the deaf or hard of hearing child. And then another example of a related service provider is the lady that is checking the young boy's ear out. Educational audiologists are also considered to be a related service. And so that individual would ensure that the child's hearing aids or cochlear implants are functioning. They may make recommendations if they find something and encourage the family to get back to their clinical audiologist to make repairs if necessary. They also might be the specialists that help determine if an FM system is appropriate for a child. And I will assume you all know what an FM system is, but if you do not, feel free to chat, or if there's anything that I mentioned here today along the way and you're just not sure what that means, chances are some of the other participants also do not know, so please feel free to ask that question. Okay, so now that we know what related services, what are they, we need to determine what related services does this particular child need. So how do we come up with what those related services need to be? See here. First of all, we need to think about the individual. each and every child. That's why it's called an individualized educational plan. It needs to be based on the individual child. And so it's not based on the category. It's not that, as soon as we learn that the child has a hearing loss, then they should get these following services. It really needs to be based on the individual child's needs. And so how do we determine what those needs are? You need to look and talk to all of the people that are part of the individualized education plan team, and that includes the parent, that includes the school teachers, that includes the intervention specialist if the child is already receiving some intervention services. Each individual member should share information about the child's strengths, about the child's weaknesses, and then based on that information, you all can discuss the type of services that could be needed for that particular child. And in education for those IEPs, we always need to have some sort of documentation of those needs. So some of the documentation could be from progress notes. So the progress notes come from if the child already has an IEP and they've got goals, then the service provider should be sending home progress notes to let the team, let the family know exactly how the child is progressing with their goals. And so also report cards should have some information about how the child is doing academically, taking actual work samples from the child, or don't think of work samples as just pieces of paper. We can also have videos about the child, especially as you think about peer interaction, social interactions. You could certainly have those be video samples as well. And then we also want to look at district and statewide testing. So all of that information together should be kind of the starting point and the data that helps us determine what related services are needed. One thing I can't stress enough is that we have to understand when we're thinking about the child, has the impact of hearing loss clearly been defined? We really need to understand not just how the child is doing academically, but also with their social development and their peer participation and involvement. How is the child relating to others? Because at the end of the day, we want children that are have a strong identity and strong social skills so that they can go out into the world and not just, know their multiplication facts, but that they can actually relate to people and live a happy and fulfilling life. And there's so much more to the child to determine when looking at some of those social and peer impacts, especially as it relates to how a hearing loss can impact the challenges in those areas. At the end of the day, your ETR, the evaluation team report, should be your best friend. If you have a very good evaluation team report, then all of that data should already be clearly in that document so that we can pull and figure out, okay, here are the areas of weaknesses, and these are the areas that we need to target, and they will be provided. Those services will be provided by these particular related services providers. So that all should be in the ETR. If it's not in the ETR, if you're sitting here today going, gosh, I know that my child needs this particular service, and I've asked for the district to provide that, and for right now they're telling us no, then just refer back to the ETR and then make sure that if the ETR doesn't have that information, then just make sure you question whether that evaluation is accurate and valid. Was it provided and done by a person that has the knowledge and skills and experience necessary to get back to the impact of hearing loss, as we mentioned earlier, that importance of knowing the impact of hearing loss as it is defined. So once we sort of realize the strengths and the needs of the child, then these are just a few of the services that are out there that, like we said, depending on the individual child and their needs, what services are out there. So one is, and of course I put this one first, a teacher for deaf and hard of hearing students. I'm a little bit biased because I am one of those, and I find great benefit in having them involved with the child. The other thing I want to say along with this is that a lot of these service providers can provide direct service. And so if they're providing direct service, then they certainly go in the related services section of the IEP. But if the child is doing fairly well academically and they don't feel that a direct service from some of these providers are necessary, you can also put them in a little bit of a different section in the IEP called Support for School Personnel, and that gives that service provider the opportunity to collaborate with the team and to continue to be part of the IEP team and to provide consultative services to the teacher, to the general education teacher, to the intervention specialist, to the speech pathologist, to whomever it is on the team that is needing a little bit more help or information or brainstorming opportunities. Another one is a speech and language pathologist. You might hear them called speech therapists, but yes, a lot of my students call them our speech teacher, but speech and language pathology is another related service provider. Audiology services, as we mentioned before, those individuals are checking the function of the hearing aids as well as helping make recommendations if they think that something needs maintained, and also doing the evaluations and probably the fitting for FM systems as well. Interpreting services, it could be American Sign Language interpreting services. It could be more of oral transliteration interpreting services. Psychological services, so we often just think about the related services as it relates to academics and access, but also psychological services are in there. Physical and occupational therapy, recreational therapy is also a related service. Medical services, we've got a lot of students that have additional medical needs, and so that would be a related service as well. And then this one, if we have any parents joining us today, this is a very interesting point for you all to know that it also includes parent counseling and training. So if your child recently was diagnosed with an additional disability, let's say you just learned your child also has autism, then the school district can provide the related services to help you learn more about that child's autism and what that means and strategies that you can employ at home. It also can include training for you as a parent to learn your rights now that your child has an IEP. Then that can include training for that. It also can include training if you have an interest in learning sign language. Then it can also help the school district provide sign language instruction for you. And so that's a very important area for our families to be aware of, that it is there. And then we also, this is often not thought of, but a deaf mentor, especially for a child that maybe is struggling with identity or connecting with others. Having an older deaf mentor that they can meet with and talk with could be something that is very beneficial for that particular child as well. And that's certainly not an all-inclusive list. There are certainly others that are out there, but it's just a few to sort of get your brain thinking. One thing to mention in related services, and this pops up as a question very frequently, is that a cochlear implant itself is not considered a related service. It states very clearly in the law that the surgery for a cochlear implant, the mapping for that implant, so if you're not familiar with that term, sort of making the adjustments to make the processor work in the perfect way that it possibly, as I shouldn't say perfect, in the best way, in the most optimal way for that child, the school district is not required for that to provide that mapping. Or if the cochlear implant becomes damaged or lost, the school district is not responsible for replacing it. However, that being said, it does require that children with cochlear implants are still eligible. They still should receive what they call FAPE, which stands for free and appropriate education for that child. So just because a child does have a cochlear implant does not mean that they have to go to a certain school or that they cannot come to school. Those children still receive the same accessibility as all of the other students that do not have cochlear implants. And it also still requires that the school district is responsible for monitoring the function of the device. So just as we said earlier, it's not that the district is responsible for fixing them, but that they should be doing frequent checks to make sure that the technology that the child has is working. So that at the very least should mean that they're doing some sort of check in the morning to make sure, and ideally several times throughout the day, to make sure that the technology is functioning appropriately. So we have a few resources listed here for you that can be very helpful. Just want to draw your attention to my very favorite down at the bottom, handsandvoices.org is a very helpful resource that has a plethora of information on a very wide variety of topics. And then I also feel strongly that some of these additional resources can be very helpful as well. So the previous slide had websites listed with information. These individuals are actually people that you can call and talk to. So recently, Ohio Hands and Voices started a program called Astra, and we have, I believe, 5 or 6 advocates that are available to any individual in the state. We do ask that if a family is needing an advocate, that they're a member of Ohio Hands and Voices. The cost for that is minimal. It's about $20 a year. So those Astra advocates are available to provide information and support for the families. And also, along with that, if you are a family or you know of a family that $20 is still a little bit too much, there are some scholarships available too, if needed. So we will certainly provide support if we possibly can. Another great place for you to call if you need to actually talk to a person is the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, and you can find them online with their contact information as well. And then we also have the Parent Mentors of Ohio that can provide that conversation if you want to have one. So that concludes our discussion, our Lunch and Learn today. Thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate your participation today. You will find our contact information there, and we are an organization that is eager to help improve the educational outcomes and the lives of deaf and hard of hearing children, and we would love to be a great resource for you all. If you have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording today's session. So here.